Vocal chains is something that everybody wants to know about, especially when mixing, and surprisingly, I've never really broken down my vocal chains that I've used in my tracks. Sure, I've shown you how to use EQ and how to use compression and how to use these individual processes, but I've never actually shown you how I put them all together to achieve a really clean and loud mix. So in today's video, I'm going to treat you to that by showing you the vocal chain that I created for EverythingOShauN's brand new song, Woj. Are you ready? Let's go.
5.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is your boy 5-Piece producer, engineer extraordinaire. Thank you for checking out today's video. I'm super excited to break down the vocal chain that I used in EverythingOShauN's latest song, Woj. If you want to check out this song, it's available now on all streaming platforms. I'll leave a link down below for you to click and listen on the platform of your choice. But what I'm going to really talk about, of course, is how I went about setting up this vocal chain, the sequence between each of these plugins and components, and everything I'm going to talk about today is in the box. So I didn't use any analog hardware whatsoever, and I'm really focusing on the mixing stuff. So I'm not talking about the chain that we use to record it with. That's something separate altogether, but I am going to talk about what I directly put onto this track. And I want to preface this whole thing by saying vocal chains are not one and done. It's not one strict template that you follow every single time. Every track is unique and different and requires a different, group of plugins or specific processing. Sometimes I'll use something on one track and then I won't use it on the next track. So this example is not necessarily the only recipe that you should follow when stacking a vocal chain together. Instead, it's an idea of how I approach this one song, and I hopefully will give you some inspiration on how to implement this into your own setup. What I plan to do is hopefully do a couple more videos like this where I break down different vocal chains and show you how I've approached each song differently so that you have an idea of how to, use these tools at your disposal in the context of your own track. With that being said, let's jump onto Pro Tools and start talking about this vocal chain that I used on this track. So right now I've got just the hook isolated on this song, and I'll just play maybe a moment of it so you know what we're dealing with, and then I'll break down step by step what is in this vocal chain and my thinking behind using these individual tools and stacking them together. But let's take a listen to what the hook sounds like right now.
I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Shorty got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm Woj, ayy. I'm in the back with the pros, yeah. Shorty got class in the shows, yeah. I know the game how it goes, yeah. I know the game like I'm Woj, yeah. I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Shorty got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm Woj, yeah. I'm in the back with the pros, yeah. Shorty got class in the shows, yeah. I know the game how it goes, yeah. I know the game like I'm Woj. I'm in the back with.
All right, so you have a pretty good idea of what this sounds like. It sounds good. I'm actually really happy with this mix. And truthfully, a lot of things have changed on my end, mixing-wise, since doing this. I probably did this record, I would say, at least 3 or 4 months ago. And that sometimes is how much of a delay there is between when you finish something and when it gets released. We're currently in the month of June. Pretty sure I did this like February at the latest, So with that being said, you're hearing the record, like what it sounds like, hopefully. And let's just break down what I've done step by step and just kind of overview my thought process throughout it. So the first plugin that I usually put on my vocal chain is a gain staging plugin. So what do I mean by that? Well, right now I'm using the Izotope Relay plugin. And right now I'm actually having it set to 0 dB. So I'm not adding, I'm not taking away, it's at unity. But I like this plugin because it has obviously a volume, it has a meter, so it's showing you your peak and RMS volume. You can manipulate the panning things left or right. In this case, I didn't do any of that. I can also increase the width. I won't really do that on a vocal, but I might do that when I'm putting this onto, individual instrument sounds, for example. The advanced tab is also pretty cool. You got mono, phase, and just, channel swapping options. You can add some track delay. You can even use a filter. I didn't use any of that stuff here. It's all off, not engaged, but I just wanted to point it out. Now, the reason why I like to do this is I usually actually leave my volume, my fader volume, so my final output on the channel, I'm leaving that at 0, and instead I'm using my relay plugin, or my gain staging plugin in this case, to set the actual level. And the reason why is it's usually because at some point I do want to do some automation. And if I've set this level statically and then I do some automation and then decide that I want to change it later, it can be very complicated and problematic. I have to then automate the whole track and move it up or move it down and do all these extra steps, which is super annoying. So the way I see it is I actually use this relay to set my level, and then I have my final volume output here. I use that for automation only. Now, again, this is something that I've been doing more recently. It's somewhat of a newer strategy that I'm taking on, but I find it very effective. It's made my life a lot simpler, and I definitely recommend that you do that. So the first plugin in the chain, a gain staging plugin of some sort. Could be relay. It could even be just a built-in trim or gain plugin or utility plugin that's in your DAW. Now the second plugin in this chain is a FabFilter Pro Q3, so basically an EQ plugin, and I'm doing a variety of moves. I'm reducing the low end here. I'm filtering out 105 and below. And that's just because I'm trying to get rid of the low end presence, the muddiness, and also just make some room for the stuff that really should dominate that low end, being the kick and the bass. I'm going in and I'm removing some problematic frequencies, 1600, almost 1700 actually by 1, 6400 roughly again by 1. And I'm actually adding a little bit of, 2700. So adding a little bit of vocal presence, right? Let's actually bypass all these plugins, and I'll just show you what this sounds like with and without the EQ. So without it first.
I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Shorty got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm Roche, ayy. I'm in the back with the pros, yeah. Shorty got class in the shows, yeah. I know the game how it goes, yeah. I know the game like I'm Roche, yeah. I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Shorty.
So, not really changing a whole lot. We're just doing little moves, little pushes and pulls in different directions, and ultimately creating a little bit more clarity with this boost and reducing a little bit of the mud and brittleness, I would say, with these cuts. All right. Now that's the first EQ, and this is a static EQ. Truthfully, I have changed my methods a little bit. I'm using a little bit more of dynamic EQ now. So where I'm not necessarily pushing or pulling things 100% all the time. Instead, it's situational. When things pass a threshold, it's being adjusted. But I usually like putting the EQ pretty much first in the chain after the gain staging plugin to start sculpting things around, getting a little bit of a sound going, and then I'm able to do some additional processing from there. Before I continue with the rest of this vocal chain, I wanted to say, if you're getting value out of this video, please smash that like button. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed yet so you can stay tuned for more helpful content. I drop something new every single week, usually on Thursdays, focused on helping you sound better and helping you make more money with your music. So if you want help with these two areas, definitely subscribe so I can help you with that. But with that being said, let's continue with this vocal chain. Now, the third plugin in the chain is a compressor. I'm specifically using the Waves Renaissance compressor. This is a great standard compressor. I can't really go wrong with using it. I find it's really easy to get a sound out of. And the way I have this set up is let's ignore the threshold for a moment, because the threshold is going to be completely dependent on the signal that you have. But I have a 2-to-1 ratio, so a very subtle ratio. I have a slower attack, a very fast release. I'm adding about 2 dB of gain, so I'm going to be losing some volume and then adding it back with this makeup gain. And because this RComp has some additional modes, I am using the opto and the warm mode. I just like opto compression when it comes to vocals, usually a little bit more of a smoother sound, so to speak. And that's why I went with that. Now, if you do want to watch a video that's really good about compression and how to use it on vocals, I'll leave a link up above to a compressor video all about rap vocals and how to compress them. So definitely check that out. But let's play this, and I'll just, play it, leave it out, and put it back in. And specifically pay attention to the volume reduction taking place. You're going to see a yellow kind of meter dripping downwards here, dropping down, and showing you how much volume reduction we're losing. You're going to see that we're probably not losing anything more than 1 or 2 dB. Very, very subtle the way I've set this up. I just want this to glue things together, catch some of the loud peaks, and overall be very transparent. That's my goal. I do things very transparently, as you could probably tell from some of my other videos. So let's check this out without it, and then I'll put it in halfway.
I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Shorty got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm Roche, ayy. I'm in the back with the pros, yeah. Sure they got class in the shows, yeah. I know the game how it goes, yeah. I know the game like I'm woke, yeah. I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Sure they got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm woke, yeah. I'm in the back with the pros, yeah. Sure they got class in the shows, yeah. I know the game how it goes, yeah. I know the game like I'm woke. I'm in the back.
All right, so hopefully you could hear that, but when the compressor's not in, things just feel a little bit thinner, obviously a bit quieter. It's coming down in volume. It's not so present. When I put the compressor in, it definitely brings the vocal up, makes it more in your face. It does create a couple of problems that you're going to see I'm going to solve in the next few steps, but overall it's doing what I want it to do. It's catching the peaks. It's making the vocal feel fuller and more upfront. And, you know, overall I'm satisfied with what we're getting out of it. So what I'm obviously saying here is, you know, after that first step of EQ, I'm going right into a compressor to sort of even things out, and then I'm able to proceed with solving some other problems and do some additional processing. So after compression, I'm putting in another compressor. This time it's a FabFilter Pro MB. This is a multi-band compressor, and I'm specifically using it to address some of the frequency imbalances that the previous compressor has introduced. I find that when I am compressing a sound, because it's sort of evening things out and gluing things together, it's bringing down the loud parts and bringing up the quiet parts as well. It's sort of, you know, bridging the gap between the loud and the quiet, obviously. I do find that it does create some harmonic imbalances, some frequency imbalances, and specifically it's usually bringing up the presence of the low end, and the low end is a very muddy range. It's usually what's responsible for the lack of clarity in a vocal. So I want to be able to tame that in a very controllable way. So what I'm using here is I'm using the FabFilter Pro MB, and as you can see, I'm using it to specifically compress the low end, which is from about 30 hertz to about 442 hertz in this particular case. So really the lows, the bass, the sub, you know, the boxiness, the muddiness, all that area. 200 to 400 is especially a problematic range, but let's see what this is doing. I'm going to play it, and please pay attention as well. You're going to see that I'm only losing upwards of 3 dB. That's where my range is set. As you can see, fast attack, pretty fast release, and again, the threshold is dependent on the signal you're sending to it, but I've set this up so that I'm losing hopefully between 1 to 2, maybe as much as 3, but probably 1 to 2 dB. Very, very subtle. And I'm adding no output volume, no makeup gain at all. This is purely a loss, so to speak. But here we go. I'll play it without it, and I'll put it in halfway through.
I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Sure they got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm Roche, ayy. I'm in the back with the pros, yeah. Sure they got class in the shows, yeah. I know the game how it goes, yeah. I know the game like I'm Roche, yeah. I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Sure they got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm Roche, yeah. I'm in the back with the pros, yeah. Sure they got class in the shows, yeah. I know the game how it goes, yeah. I know the game like I'm woke. I'm in the back.
All right, hopefully you get the idea here, but you can see it's just really making things sound smoother. When I don't have this multi-band compressor in, it's you know, making the low end, it just kind of pokes out, right? It feels like it's just coming out a little bit too much, a little too pronounced, especially on certain phrases. And because this is a dynamic compressor, like it's, you know, multi-band, it's focused on that frequency range, and only when that frequency becomes a problem does it actually reduce it. I feel like it's smoothing out certain words specifically, especially like the end of his phrases. I'm in the back with the pros. Like his pros kind of comes out a little bit more, has a little bit more low-end presence. This thing is obviously helping tame that, and again, just making it smoother. So I'm using this Pro MB to smooth out any frequency imbalances that is caused by the previous compressor, which I find very often happens whenever I'm using one. So following the multi-band compressor, we have another EQ, and this is obviously, again, taming a very specific problem. Truthfully, I probably could have used just this EQ or just the multi-band and had it sort of solve various issues, but in this case, I decided to have the multi-band solve the low-end issue, and now this Pro Q3, this other Pro Q3, it's the second one in the chain now, is solving a high-end issue, and it's probably focused on sibilance. I haven't really talked about that right now, but you know, I'm not using a de-esser, as you can tell, but what I'm doing is I'm actually using this Pro Q as a de-esser because I feel like the S's were becoming problematic. Now, just as a side note, I do recommend that you put a de-esser in your tracks whenever an S becomes a problem. So if you're listening to a track, you haven't done any processing yet, and the S's are already jumping out at you and they're, hurting your ears or just poking out too much and you could tell, go ahead and add a de-esser at the beginning of the chain. But if the S's aren't really a problem until later, after you've done a few steps, so maybe you add a shelf, you add some EQ, you add some compression, and then the S's start coming out, well, then you should actually use the de-esser. So what I'm obviously saying is whenever the problem makes itself known, that is when you should treat it. Don't just treat it blindly. Don't just decide to throw a de-esser in there because you see everybody doing it. I don't do that. Sometimes my de-esser is at the beginning of the chain. Sometimes it's at the end. Really all depends, Now, in this case, it's coming in after that multi-band compressor. And as you can see here, I'm focusing specifically on about almost 13,000 hertz. In fact, if I just play this and let's solo this frequency, it's here we're getting rid of here. You can hear it's just like a higher end frequency. It's not actually the worst. In fact, it may not even be fully sibilance here, but it's just like this high end frequency that I feel like is poking out a little bit more than the others, and I want to sort of smooth it out and reduce it. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually reducing it by 1 dB, super small move, but then I also have a dynamic EQ that allows it to come down even more. So if I have a 3 dB curve here, you see that it can come down as much as 2.5 dB. So anything that's really excessive that passes the threshold, so certain phrases, of course, it's going to pull it down even more. So let's just kind of play it and see if it does that at all.
I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Shorty got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm Woj, ayy. I'm in the back.
So as you can see, it is grabbing the sibilance, right? When he says Woj, shows, anything that has like that kind of S sort of characteristic, you see it pulling it down. It is pulling it down for other things as well, but overall it's very subtle, very quick. It's happening very fast, pulling it down, coming back immediately, right? So fairly transparent. And let's just do a quick play without it and with it.
I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Shorty got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm Woj, ayy. I'm in the back with the pros, yeah. Shorty got class in the shows, yeah. I know the game how it goes, yeah. I know the game like I'm Woj, yeah. I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Shorty got class in the shows, ayy.
So just taming it a little bit, again, very subtle, almost hard to notice, but that's pretty much how I mix. I do things very subtly on purpose. And overall, again, the problem I'm trying to solve here is just fixing any, high-end imbalances and specifically focusing on sibilance if there are any sibilance problems that present themselves in the mix. Now, the final plugin on this chain is a saturation plugin, and I'm specifically using Pro Tools Avid's stock Lo-Fi plugin. I'm not using anything built into it, not any noise, not any anti-aliasing, sample size, sample rate, none of that stuff. It's all set to the standard settings, but I am adding a 0.1 of distortion and a 0.1 of saturation. I find that when you push it beyond these limits, you start to get, some noticeable distortion effects, but when I do it this subtly, all it does is really just warm up the sound. Truthfully, I have been moving on and using other saturation plugins since, especially a lot of the stuff from Plugin Alliance. But this is great if you are on Pro Tools and are using a stock plugin. But you could definitely use other things. You could use, FabFilters, Saturn, Plugin Alliance. They have a whole bunch of plugins, like I said. I like using the black box. I've shown you some videos of that as well. I'll leave a link up above if you want to see some videos on that specifically. But this is just, again, adding a little bit more warmth and presence, rounding out some of the edges, some of the harsh peaks on the track potentially as well. And let's just see, is 0.1 on both of these settings, distortion and saturation, is 0.1 enough to make a difference and make things sound a little bit more pleasant, let's say, right? So I'll play it without it, I'll put it in, and let's make our judgment.
I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Shorty got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm Woj, ayy. I'm in the back with the pros, yeah. Shorty got class in the shows, yeah. I know the game how it goes, yeah. I know the game like I'm Woj, yeah. I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Shorty got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm Woj, yeah. I'm in the back with the pros, yeah. Shorty got class in the shows, yeah. I know the game how it goes, yeah. I know the game like I'm Woj. I'm in the back with the
So it really does just make this track a little bit louder, right? It really increases the perceived loudness, and that's why I like to use saturation. I'm using it towards the end of my chain here. I have seen people throw it at the beginning of their chain. I've seen people put it in the middle. Kind of depends, but I do find that for myself personally, I am usually introducing it towards the end of a chain. And this is where this particular vocal chain ends. Now, is there other stuff that I would add on a vocal chain? Absolutely. This is a specific example here that I'm showing you, and you can kind of see how it sort of synergizes and makes this track better. In fact, what I want to do is let me do a quick A/B where I show you without everything. I'll leave the relay in, but I'll get rid of everything else. And let's just hear the difference without it, and with it, I'll put it in at a certain point and you'll see.
I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Shorty got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm Woj, ayy. I'm in the back with the pros, yeah. Shorty got class in the shows, yeah. I know the game how it goes, yeah. I know the game like I'm Woj, yeah. I'm in the back with the pros, ayy. Shorty got class in the shows, ayy. I know the game how it goes, ayy. I know the game like I'm Woj, yeah. I'm in the back with the pros, yeah. Shorty got class in the shows, yeah. I know the game how it goes, yeah. I know the game like I'm Woj. I'm in the back with the pros.
So you can see that without it, obviously it's quieter, thinner, not as present, not as forward, and through these steps, as subtle as they are, it's just making things sound more forward. So like I was saying previously, is there anything missing from this chain? Sure. I mean, everyone's chain is going to be a little bit different. Sometimes I will put, additional compression, right? Serial compression, so where you have multiple compressors in series. I'm going to be shooting a video on that soon. Whenever that comes out, I'll leave a link up above. But multiple compressors. I might put limiting in there towards the end of the chain so I can just drive the level up. Maybe I'm doing some other stuff. Maybe I use a vocal rider to handle my automation for me, and I'll do that towards the end of the chain as well. So many different ways that you could approach a vocal. This is how I approach this one. It's very, very simple. And I find that my best mixes are the ones that I enjoy the most, that I find translate the best. They are usually simple. Sure, you may look at this and be like, oh, this guy's got like 6 plugins. That's a lot. I've had chains where it's 2 plugins. I've had chains where it's 10. It really depends. And of course, there are things that we are not discussing at all right now, such as, the bus compression, because right now we're focused on just this individual hook track, but I have some additional stuff on the bus. I'll shoot a video for that in the future. I'm not showing you the automation, so how, each track kind of increases or decreases in volume where we need to. I'm not showing the gain staging, of course, because you can see there's little edits and stuff that I made to this where I'm going in and turning down parts, potentially some sibilance problems as an example, right here, turning down this by 1.5, things like that. So there's all these little things that also add up that show you the vocal chain is not the only consideration that you need to have here. There's so many things you need to consider, and everything really does start with having a quality recording that you can then manipulate and make fit into the track, make it sound better, more enhanced, etc. But it all starts from the beginning process. If you want to watch a video on recording yourself properly, I'll leave a link to that as well. So definitely check that out, because I find that a lot of people, they make mistakes right from the beginning that then affect these later processes, such as mixing. So I hope you got value out of this video. Appreciate you guys for watching. If you did get value, if you liked it, please like this video. Smash that like button until it turns blue. Hit the subscribe button so you can stay tuned for more helpful content, and leave me a comment below. Let me know if you like this. Let me know what you learned from it, and let me know what you want to see in a future video. And I'm excited to see you guys again in the very near future. All right? Y'all take care now. Peace.
5.